I always say that rejection is information. Sometimes no is not yet. Sometimes no is the wrong path, because I don't think The New Yorker was the right path for me. It was like I was gently being guided over to the thing that really made my heart sing, which was syndicated comic, great colors, doing it every day. That style I gravitate toward. So I think rejection is simply information. And maybe we don't have enough skills. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and learn more.
Imagine having a lifelong dream, and through decade plus of rejections, that dream finally becomes a reality, only for that particular industry to fall apart. So then you jump into another dream and you get a graphic novel published from Scholastic Graphics, the preeminent, biggest, most wonderful publisher out there for kids. And then a global pandemic shuts down your entire ability to book tour and promote. That's exactly what happened to today's guest. Maria Scrivan is a brilliant humorist, cartoonist, graphic novelist. She is an absolute joy to talk to. I cannot wait for you to get to know her a little bit more through this conversation. Her Nat books are charming and wonderful. It's sort of like a modern day Ramona Quimby in graphic novel form. And hey, real quick, before we get going today, if you would like to support this show, you may do so by visiting studiojjk.com/shop. You can buy a sticker, get a t-shirt, get a book. You could join our monthly sketch club. I'm making little sketches and sending them out to supporters every single month. Also, if you have a question, because in between these interviews with my friends, I answer listener questions. And so you may submit a question at studiojjk.com/podcasts. Oh, and you can also support the show by making sure you're subscribing and leaving a review. Like, that's going to go a long way to help me grow this show. Okay, thank you for listening to that spiel. Let's get into Maria Scrivan's origin story.
JJK. Origin Stories with JJK.
Jared Krasoska.
Maria Scrivan, thank you so much for joining me today. I cannot wait to dig deep, to get to know you a little bit better. I mean, you really are one of the very, very few people in this book business who pulled off the impossible. Like, your big debut of your big graphic novel happened when the world was shut down during COVID. And then that book still became a huge success and spawned a bunch of sequels. But before we get to that part, I want to rewind all the way back to your childhood. I want to ask, like, what was your world like when you were a kid? Like, what were you surrounded by? Who was in your home? What was the vibe? What were your interests and loves? And I just love to like pick your brain a little bit and know about that early time in your life.
Oh, thank you for inviting me here. And I love this question so much. It's such a fun, and I feel like my life is not that different now, because it was a lot of drawing and riding my bike and being outside, which are still my favorite things. I currently live in Greenwich, Connecticut. I also grew up here in Greenwich, Connecticut. I was an only child. I still am. So a lot of drawing filled in my time of being by myself. And I really value my alone time. I love people, and I'm so grateful to have so many wonderful people in my life, but I also really value my alone time. So it was me, my parents. We lived in a 2-family house. We had tenants upstairs, and that it was like I had tons of pets. As an only child, I think my parents were trying to fill in the gaps. So there was one point that I had a cat, a dog. I had a canary named Sylvester from, Bugs Bunny, who I loved and still love. 2 gerbils. Then there's a hamster named Tootsie that bit me and then went back to the store. And then I had a pet chicken. My grandfather, my parents came here from Italy on the Andrea Doria a few months before it sank. And I had really very Italian rich heritage. And my grandfather one year gave me a pet chicken, not a chick, a whole chicken for a gift. And we lived in a very residential neighborhood. There was nowhere to put a chicken. So my mom was like, okay. So Esmeralda lived in the basement for a little while and laid, I think, an egg. And then Esmeralda went to the farm, but she really went to a farm. It wasn't like a soup pot. I had a pet rabbit named Nellie. That didn't last long because my mom was like, indoor rabbits are great pets. She wasn't up for it. So let me put it that way. Yeah. Nellie also went to the farm, but really a farm. So I always had tons of animals. I loved riding my bike, just loved the freedom of just hopping on my bike and riding around the neighborhood and seeing what friends were around. Because I lived on sort of like, it was a short road, so it wasn't like a lot of my friends lived in neighborhoods and I didn't have that. So I'd ride to their neighborhoods and, go roller skating in their neighborhoods. And I loved roller skating. So all that stuff, like my childhood loves, I kind of still do a lot of it. Yeah.
It sounds like, were you a very keen observer of say like the tenants who lived above and your animals? Like you to me, it sounds like you might have been a keen observer of other people, or were you making up narratives for your animals?
Oh, for sure. The animals. Yeah. The tenants I didn't even notice. I was just like, it was like a side note. They were there, but I didn't even really notice them for some reason. But I also kind of made up stories all the time, especially when I was really little, like just, I'm running around the house, but I'm now in a race, against like imaginary friends, like that kind of thing. So I was always making up stories and I never thought about that until you just said it. But yeah.
And I connect to that because I was, for all intents and purposes, an only child. I have aunts that are like sisters to me. As a teenager, I discovered half siblings I never knew about. But for the majority of my childhood, like I was the only child in the home. And like you, I would throw myself into sketching and drawing and storytelling. And I had imaginary friends as well. What kind of media were you consuming, like, be it TV or books or comics? Like what was like something that really lit you up?
So like I said, Bugs Bunny, massive Bugs Bunny fan. And then Saturday morning cartoons with, Super Friends and all that, starting at 7, basically Super Friends, and like as many as I could consume. And I was a huge comic strip person. So for me, it was Peanuts and Garfield. And when I was a little kid, I just devoured every Garfield book that came out, just devoured. And he was a cartoonist, and that's where that really spawned, that John Arbuckle, the main character in Garfield, was a cartoonist, obviously, as well as Jim Davis. But that whole narrative was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a cartoonist. I want my comic in the newspaper, which I was lucky to have for 10 years. I recently retired it and have been focusing more on the books. But when I saw my comic in the funny pages, my 8-year-old brain completely exploded. And then to bring it full circle, I'm part of the National Cartoonist Society and got to meet Jim Davis, and he blurbed my book.
Oh,
so I
wow.
always say, like, if I had a time machine to go back to like my 9-year-old self and be like, okay, you're never going to believe this. Like, you're going to have a comic in the paper, you're going to have books, and Jim Davis is going to blurb your book. Like, I would have never imagined that in a million years.
I had all the treasuries as well. And
oh, yeah.
One year, I didn't want to wait for the treasury to be published, so I would cut the strips out of the newspaper every day and put them in a photo album, and I would make a handmade. I had all the Trapper Keepers.
Oh yes,
I've never got to meet Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield, and I can just imagine, did he like hate Mondays and love lasagna? Like, is he more like John or is he more like Garfield?
It's funny. Like, I absolutely know from being around so many authors and in the Cartoonist Society, we are our characters, whether we. Everything we do is a self-portrait, whether we mean to or not. We all like look like our characters. We act like our characters. And he did a great talk actually and said that it was kind of a formula too. So he knew Mondays were about Mondays. Wednesday was like about lasagna. Friday was about, Odie fights. So he also, it like helped inform his strip too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
So but he's wonderful and he's been a huge help. I've written to him many times and he's been such a mentor and support. Again, what I would have never imagined. And the nicest, like the sweetest person in the world. So I'm so grateful to know him. He's wonderful.
I love that. I love that for you. Because, sometimes people, they say, don't meet your heroes because they could disappoint. So I'm so
did not disappoint.
Heartened to know that he did not disappoint. You're an artist, you're an illustrator as well. Like, when did your drawing like catch the attention of adults and like, what did that feel like for you?
Well, that's interesting. So like a big milestone, I think, was I had this amazing teacher who had us do a book project in 6th grade, and I had to draw it because that's what I do. I realized after all this time, I am a visual communicator and a visual learner. So when people always ask me like, oh, do you draw first or do you write first, whatever, I have to do both simultaneously. So when we had this book project, I had to draw it. And I ended up winning a contest and going to the Capitol in Connecticut.
Nice.
And that whole experience actually is the last third of Nat Enough. And what's even weirder, this is such a crazy story that I've told so many times, but I just can't believe it even happened. I ended up running into that teacher while I was working on Nat here in town. I was at the beach down in Greenwich where I love, there's this beautiful deck and I like to write there. And I, that same day, couldn't remember her name because I don't know why, just brain fart. And I was walking across the parking lot and there she was, Mrs. Lamazzo. And my jaw hits the ground. And I was like, hey, did you used to teach at Coscob School? And she's like, Maria, you used to love to write and draw. First thing she said to me. Remembers my parents, remembered where they live. We sat down and talked, and speaking to her ignited this whole cascade of memories. And by the way, this is my first book. I was completely stuck on the end. I was horrified. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Creative synchronicity is a real thing. So I run into her, and then that conversation ends up igniting this whole cascade of memories that ends up becoming the third of the Nat book. So I draw the Capitol building in Hartford, and like that whole experience. And actually the photographs I have, like I had a balloon in my hand, all of that ended up in the book. So that maybe was like some of the first times, but ever since I could hold a pencil, all I wanted to do was be a cartoonist. And I had plenty of you need something to fall back on always, right? And especially I was the first person in my family to go to college. So it was a lot of pressure because I wanted to go to art school. And it's like, well, you need something to fall back on. And it was like, you're the first person in our family who's, nobody said that, but I felt, I knew.
Sure. Yes.
So, and everybody was trying to help. My guidance counselors, my parents, everybody was trying to help me. So I ended up being a fine arts major in a liberal arts school, which was great. But I lost my thought. Okay, wait, hold on.
No, I mean, I'm going to make some connections as well. I remember distinctly my high school guidance counselor sitting me down
with that, right,
and taking out the statistics of the likelihood of being able to make a career as a cartoonist.
It's so brutal.
And it came from a place of love and pragmatism.
Yes.
Like he was a good guy. 100%. And in a way, when I would hear people say, it's unlikely you can't do it, that actually helped fuel me to say, oh yeah, you just wait.
I'm the same way. And I should also add, my parents have always been incredibly loving and supporting, and it absolutely came from a place of love. They've never tried to like stomp on my dreams. They've been 100% supportive the whole time. But just like that, it's like they're worried. So let's just kind of give you the whole picture. I was going to say that, that idea of a fallback, like, you need something to fall back on. Cartooning was my fallback. So in school, anytime we had creative assignments, make a diorama, write a haiku, I did a comic 100% of the time. And it always worked. It was like, that's how I got an A. So I have this funny mock cliff notes I made of all the books from AP English in high school. I've got, Hamlet. So I think Mad Magazine, here, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. I did Mad Magazine style. Othello, of course, was about the game, right? And chips. I did Mad Magazine style, like, oh yeah, here, Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. I did Mad Magazine style spoofs, but it worked. I did kind of read the books. I didn't really read all of them. But so the funny thing was, everybody's like, you need a fallback. I'm like, it is my fallback. Like, this is all I know. Like, this is it. So luckily it worked.
I feel the same way. I guess adult perspective, you think, wow, I'm really lucky that worked out because I didn't have any other plans.
Me neither.
And I think there's a part of that too, when something you're very passionate about, if you really want to make that your job, you're gonna work so hard and you're gonna push through so many rejections.
Oh yes.
And I'm interested in what it was like for you to be a cartoonist at a fine art program. Was that difficult? Because there's a lot of snobbery towards cartoonists in the fine art world.
Oh yes, there was. As a matter of fact, I love telling this story. The head of the art department thought cartooning wasn't art. So I wrote him into the fourth book, and he's the new principal in Nat for Nothing, which is all about self-doubt.
Yeah. Teach kids as if they're going to grow up to write about it.
Right. And unfortunately, he's not around. Otherwise, I would have happily sent him a copy.
Yeah.
What was so funny, when I was I went to Clark University in Worcester.
Hey, that's where I grew up. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know if we ever talked about that. I forgot. Yeah, and actually, I don't know if I told you this, but I remember when I saw your book and saw the Gates School, I was like, I know that building, like, because having been in Worcester all those years.
Gates Lane, yeah, sure, for sure. Gates Lane School, and you did not live far from where we would go to get comics, if that's entertainment, on Park Ave.
Oh, I wish I knew about it at the time because I didn't. But
yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I forgot. I don't know if I ever told you that.
No.
So the head of the art department said cartooning was an art, fine. And I remember doing this project because I was so mad because every time I would integrate cartooning the whole time. And one time I did this project where I took like a bed sheet, smeared paint all over it, cut it into pieces, sewed it back together on a sewing machine and brought it in, thinking the whole time, this is complete just junk. Like, this is a joke. Yeah. And he's like, this is it. I'm like, this isn't it. This isn't it. So what I did do, I had this great teacher one day, he's like, bring an object to class. And I was late, so I'm running out. I grab a hammer. Little did I know that was all I was drawing for the entire semester. The entire semester. That was it. So I did every medium. I did big hammers, small hammers, like a hammer mural, like all this stuff. And then it all ended up getting distilled down to a hammer cartoon character. And I did a series with it. So as much as they tried to get it out of me,
yeah,
like,
it's there.
It's there. And it never went away. It never went away. So it's like who I am. Like, I can't, like, no matter what, you know. And I loved my fine art background. I actually I did a semester abroad in the south of France junior year in Provence, which was magic, just complete magic. It was sculpting in a rock quarry and painting plein air, hiking into the landscape. And I miss painting. I haven't painted landscapes in a little while because of book deadlines. But I'm so grateful for my fine arts background, you know, to have figure drawing, color theory, all of that. It all plays into what I do. So the cartooning part was mostly self-taught. I ended up taking a cartooning class with Brian Walker of High and Lois and Beetle Bailey.
Oh, wow.
And we're also still good friends. But yeah, that ended up getting me a job at an animation studio. So it was a very long, crazy, windy path and a million rejections. But like I said, I can't give up. Like, I just can't. So.
It was working at an animation studio one of your first, grown-up jobs out of school?
Yes, it was right out of school. And I think at that time I had like 3 different jobs. I was waitressing, working at a coffee shop, and at this animation studio. It was here next town over in Stamford. Mm-hmm. And I walked in there with my portfolio just out of school. And the owner of the studio, Chuck Jepson, who was wonderful, was like, oh, I've heard of you. I'm like, that's impossible. He'd heard of me because I took Brian Walker's class, who was his best friend. Oh. And Brian must have said, oh, there's this girl in my class. But he didn't tell me to go there. Back a million years ago, there was something called Writer's Market and then Cartoonist Market. So I found this randomly in Cartoonist Market, walk in, and he's like, knows who I am. So it was
like, what do you say, like a printed book, right?
Yes, it was a printed book a long time ago that would have, back in the day, like places you could submit articles or books, or cartooning was like, these are the syndicates. So I find this place, I see it's like right next town over. And yeah, and he like recognizes me. It was a small studio. We did, I was an in-betweener. So back then, hand-drawn. He had I'm totally dating myself. An Amiga toaster was like, it would take a day to render a head turning. Like they would set it overnight. And one of my friends from there actually went off ended up being the head of animation at Blue Sky, which unfortunately doesn't exist.
Oh, what was that Lisa Fragner?
No, maybe not head of animation. He had a high level of animation. Jim Bresnahan, he was wonderful.
I've met him before, yes.
Okay,
sure.
so he was one of the, there was 4 of us.
I used to go into Blue Sky for meetings, when they were in upstate New York, Connecticut.
They're here. They're around the corner from where I live. I'm in Greenwich, but I'm right on the border. So they're like literally around the corner from where I'm sitting right now. And I'm so bummed they're not here anymore.
It's such a loss to the animation.
It really was.
Community.
It really was. So, so I was an in-betweener. So back then it was literally drawing on paper. So if a hand goes from here to here, I drew this.
You drew every single step in between the way to get that fluid motion.
And I did the voiceovers. So I drew a bunch of mouths and then would, using, I don't know, like paint, like DP paint, and would just put them on, which meant listening to the soundtrack 300,000 times to get that. So what I learned in that, I would love to be in animation with Nat or whatever, but I don't personally want to animate because I would love to see my characters get up and run around, but I personally, realized in that I don't want to be an animator, but I would love, I'm happy to work in animation.
It's a lot of work to be an animator. It's amazing. A lot of hours, a lot of just brutal hours to get those characters moving. You know something? I don't think I ever told you this. I don't talk about it too much because it's a part of my history that I sometimes just forget. But I just came across it recently. When I was in 9th grade, I pitched a comic strip to a syndicate. And so what the listeners should know is Syndicate, like they would take the cartoon, like comic strip, and get it into all the different newspapers. And eventually, over time, I went from wanting to do comic strips to maybe animation to maybe comic books for Marvel or DC, and then eventually children's publishing, because I started with picture books. But I'd love to know what your path was to getting a comic in the newspaper via a syndicate.
Yeah, it was. So that was basically based on Rejection. So I'll keep the path short, but after animation, I tripped and fell into the internet as I was doing like a graphic design gig. And this was, again, whatever, it was a long time ago. This was at a point where we had JCPenney as a client. They didn't believe anybody was going to buy anything online. And we said, you really should put your URL on your printed material. Yeah. So then I end up sort of getting looped into that company. It was the company that developed the ad banner. So it was Moda Media in Westport. They didn't make ad banners. They developed the concept of an ad banner. So we are like working on it. We're all so young. We're just out of school. We're all figuring it out as we go along.
Yeah.
So I did that and then started my own graphic design business. And it was probably 2008 or 9 that I said, I cannot not be a cartoonist. I have to do this. And I had self-published a picture book in 2008. On Amazon, long before there was a platform, long before self-publishing was anything. That total disaster. Started submitting to magazines. So I had gotten into Mad and I did stuff for Highlights, and Parade magazine was the tipping point because I submitted and they bought like 25 cartoons in one shot. And at that moment, they were paying like $325 for a cartoon. Then they shrunk it to 175, then 0, because I don't think they even do them. But that was sort of my like, maybe this can work kind of thing. Then I went into the New Yorker for 2 years, because being in Greenwich and Stamford, I'm very close.
Oh, like you were an employee of the New Yorker.
No. I went to pitch cartoons.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I'm sorry if I didn't
You went
clarify.
in with your portfolio in hand to say, please look at my work?
So on Tuesdays, you got to go in and Bob Mankoff was there. And what I learned was there was a huge slush pile like this big. And that would just sit there. So if you wanted to be seen, you had to go in there and sit. So I went in, and at that time, they were, that was 4 Times Square. There was this amazing room called the Cartoonist Lounge. And there I am hanging out with George Booth, who's writing his names on the back. And I got to meet like Sam Gross, who became a huge mentor to me, and Roz Chast, whose work I love. Like I got to meet so many of my New Yorker heroes and kept going and going and going, got rejected and rejected and rejected. One day, Morley Safer was there to scope out the place for a 60 Minutes episode. And I'm sitting there, Morley Safer's sitting next to me. Bob Mankoff's telling me how horrible I am, just to quit. And Morley Safer's laughing, and he tells him to stop laughing at my stuff. He's like, no, you're not, don't laugh. So I never got into the New Yorker, but I had a stack of rejected comics. So I said, what I really want to do, like, I love bright colors. I'm like, what am I even doing? Like, I want to be in the newspaper. So having all those rejections gave me a stack to start sending to syndicates. And lots of rejections there. And then I got picked up by Tribune. And I was with Tribune for, I guess, 7 or 8 years. And then the last 3 years with Andrews McMeel. So it was all based on rejection. That's how it worked out.
And it's interesting to hear that, because it really sounds like, when you were doing graphic design, like that, it's a pretty safe bet, right? The internet was new, high in demand, good paying jobs, but your heart at your core, that little girl in you, it was still there that said, this is what you really want to do. And how brave of you to put aside the sure bet, right? The consistent work to just get rejections and get torn apart by critics at the New Yorker when you're trying to pitch your stuff. Yeah,
it was rugged. Yeah, it was a fierce criticism, but it's part of it. I mean, we all know it's part of it. And I know that you and I both say this in school talks. I'm sure it's just part of it. And it literally, I always say that rejection is information. Sometimes no is not yet. Sometimes no is the wrong path, because I don't think the New Yorker was the right path for me. It was like I was gently being guided over to the thing that really made my heart sing, which was syndicated comic, bright colors, doing it every day. That style I gravitate toward. So I think rejection is simply information. It gives us, and maybe we don't have enough skills. Maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and learn more, which is why When I had, I don't know, 10 different picture book ideas before I got the Nat contract in 2018. I mentioned I self-published a book in 2008. It took me 10 years to get from that self-published book to a contract. So
with Scholastic, with
Scholastic,
one of the biggest children's book publishers out there.
Yeah, which, by the way, I had a little piece of paper on my drawing board with the word Scholastic long before I even had the idea for Nat.
Oh, that is cool.
If someone said to me, it's going to happen, you just have to wait a decade, I would have quit, right? But I didn't know. So I'm going and I'm making stuff and I'm having fun. And then 10 years later, and as you mentioned before, I'm working on, I think it was late 2018, I got the contract. So I'm working on the book through 2019. 2 books came out in 2020. So I was on my own personal house arrest. I was my own personal lockdown, I should say. Because I was my first book. It was my debut. I'd never written a graphic novel. I didn't even work sequentially yet. I was used to panel comics, right? Mm-hmm, so yes. I'm so excited because the books are coming out April 7th, 2020. And I'm going to be out in the world. I had a tour.
You had a big book tour planned?
Yeah, so I had a tour, and instead we were all talking about washing groceries, and I sadly made myself a little cake at home because I was like, I got to celebrate. It took me a decade. My whole life I worked on that. It took me a decade for that moment, and there I was at home washing groceries or whatever it was.
How did you talk yourself out of a deep despair over that?
There was despair.
Yeah.
I was bummed. I was really bummed. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
It's your moment. Yeah. This was your moment.
Yeah. I was so bummed. And I remember going out for a bike ride to Elm Street Books in New Canaan because I was riding my bike and running a lot during the pandemic because I was like, I have to be outside. And I saw my book in the window on my bike. It's like a zombie apocalypse. There's nobody outside. And I ride by this window and there's my book in the window. And I'm like, oh, yay. There it is.
That's so sweet of them, though.
It was nice. Yeah. So, but it did all work out, and I was then just doing what I was always doing just working on more books in the series and staying on lockdown anyways. My life didn't change that much.
Right. That's the thing. When you are a stay-at-home cartoonist, you tend to stay at home, except for the fact. But then when you jump into graphic novels and publishing for kids, a big part of it is getting in front of big audiences and visiting schools and visiting bookstores. Before we get into the success of Nat, how much do you give Nat of your own? Obviously, there's a lot of your own personal history. Is it a mix? Do you throw in some of your own life, completely made up stuff, or things that you observe to breathe life into that character?
Yeah. So I love this question because it gets me really thinking about, because it's so unconscious when I'm writing. So it's fun to kind of look back and think about it. She started out based on my childhood self, and all the experiences in the first Nat book were things that I went through. So she has this wacky bird costume, which I have a photo of myself in the same costume. She gets plucked by the kid sitting behind her in the play I did. So it was kind of I got to go through these experiences that, were pretty traumatic at the time, getting made fun of, being bullied and all that stuff, and write about it. But then as a character, she took on a life of her own. And a lot of even current feelings from myself get rolled in, and a lot of observation. So something in my panel comic is I love observational humor of just the human condition, stuff that we're going through, anything from being frustrated with technology or just things that we experience and see. So a lot of that gets rolled in, but even feelings I'm having now. So Nat for Nothing was all about self-doubt. And that book almost broke me. I rewrote it, I don't know, countless times. I inked the whole thing by hand and then re-inked the whole book digitally.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was perfect though. It was about self-doubt. And I call them doubt gremlins that get in your mind and tell you all these things about yourself and to not listen to them. So that book was me coaching myself through writing that book. So it's definitely and when I did All Is Nat Lost, she goes on a class trip in Philadelphia. So I went to Philadelphia on a day where there was 100 class trips happening, of course, because again, creative synchronicity, they're everywhere. Yeah. So I just put myself on one. I'm at the end of the line and I'm following them into Congress Hall, and I talked to the teacher and she's like, we're having a scavenger hunt. I'm like, can you tell me about that? So I tell her what I'm doing. She's like, absolutely. So much of that conversation ends up in the book. And there's this scene where they're all outside the Rocky sculpture, because when I love the Rocky sculpture outside the Philadelphia Museum of Art, because all day long people are flexing and it's hilarious. So I put that in the book. So it's a lot of just like me kind of like bumbling through life, and things that strike me funny end up in the book, and feelings and, you know, actual childhood experiences, but it's not limited to childhood experiences. Some of them are happening right now.
Well, I mean, I think the listeners should know that a character in which everything goes well for and nothing goes wrong, and the character gets anything they want without any turmoil, it makes for a very boring character and
It's
a very
true.
boring story. And it can be hard when you're growing up, or even in the moment when something terrible is happening.
Yes,
You can't see the humor in it. It's just all so terrible.
correct.
But then when you give it some time
Yeah.
and you can look back on it and you can see the hilarity
Oh,
in
absolutely.
having to wear that big chicken suit or the big bird suit.
It is. And I mean, everything in life has challenges. Like everything has. And it's really like, I think I've learned now, you know, it's my response to the challenges and then looking at what they meant. And I really do think that the world, the universe has our best interest in mind, even though it may not seem like it all the time. But when I look back, I kind of always see why, like all those, like getting rejected from the New Yorker. I was devastated. But then I realized when I look back there was a purpose to it. And I think one of the great things about having a daily comic and a daily deadline for 10 years was I was forced to look at life through the lens of humor. And I was always having to create. And there was was it 7 years? I think 7 years I had both the book deadline and the daily comic deadline, which
That's
was
tough.
a lot to do simultaneously. So I was absolutely working 7 days a week, constantly in any moment. I had a sketchbook. So like if I was meeting a friend for coffee, I'm like, I have my sketchbook because I can write like 5 gags while I'm waiting for them to come. But it
Yes.
really forced me like always having to come up with something like what, you know, anything like just looking at life kind of through this lens of humor and also absurdity. Like a car wash can become like a source of a joke. Like my dog, who is a huge inspiration, most of my days, what would my dog say if he could talk to me? And that ends up both in the comic and in the Nat books. And the opening of every chapter of every Nat book, there's a comic between Nat's pets, Cat and Treat, which, as I said, I grew up with tons of pets. And that was based when that cat is no longer here, but my dog and my cat did not get along. And I kind of like that dynamic echoes what's happening in the story. So I just try to imagine what my dog would be saying. So all that stuff sort of, it's like my whole life ends up getting rolled into the books, whether, yeah, like I said, whether I mean to or not, I guess.
And that's a really good reminder for those of us that are like me, who sometimes you try to fill small moments by just taking out your phone and scrolling the news or scrolling social media. And when you do that, you're not in the world that your body is in.
Yes.
And you miss things. I love, especially, you know, at the airport, I love sketching people, or if I'm on a subway.
Me too.
Way easier now because everyone's looking at their phone and not paying attention to the people around them. But but when I remember to just be present and I overhear a conversation,
totally, it's
so fun to imagine their history and like what's going to happen next in that conversation when they move beyond earshot.
You're right. And I that's a challenge of myself because I'm very easily sucked into bright, shiny things, whatever, like sucked into my phone. And when I do, I've actually made a commitment now to bring a sketchbook. And I was just actually listening to music in the park in Ridgefield, a couple towns over. And I was like, I'm going to sketch. I'm not, you know, like this is a perfect moment to sit in this chair listening to bluegrass and sketch. So that's been, it's addictive by design, right? So that it was purposely made. So it's not like I'm letting myself off the hook a little bit, but there is so much in those moments of being present and hearing conversations and drawing people in airports and trains, and travel is a huge part of my life. And that I get so much creative inspiration from traveling and drawing what I see. And I know, like, drawing and journaling what I see captures an experience in a way that a photograph tells a small part of it. But there's just so much depth when you sit there and just stare at a building or stare at something and draw it and write about what you're smelling and eating and all that. So I love it.
And when you're sketching, you really see the details, whether it be architecture, or like, I love going to see live music and I bring my sketchbook. Yeah. I just like the body language of how someone holds their hand towards the microphone and how they move their body. And I think it's important to point out that, you know, while Marie and I are both professionals, like, and so we, in a way, sketching is something that benefits like what our job is. You get so many mental health benefits from sketching. Like for me, it just centers me. The stress can kind of wash away. Just the act of making marks on a page is so therapeutic. So I really can't encourage that enough for folks listening. And so how many Nat books are there now? You've had a lot of Nat books in a very short amount of time.
6 in 5 years.
Wow.
And like I said, April 7th, 2020 was the first one. So like the first 3, because Absolutely Nat came out in 2021. The first 3 were like pandemic books, really. I did a lot of Zooms, you know, so my visits were all virtual. So it wasn't really till, must have been like maybe late 21, early 22 that I got to go to schools finally in person. And that was amazing. I just absolutely love that. So there's 6 books out now. I'm working on 7, which will be out next year. And then 8's coming out in 28. And then I'm so excited. I started a younger reader series called Undercover Pup, which is like Nat gets into some heavy emotions. It's all through the lens of humor, but there's like, you know, friend drama and emotions and things. Undercover Pup is just goofy. And when I was growing up, I loved TV Batman, you know,
yes.
series on TV that's just so campy and silly. And again, bright colors and all kinds of stuff. I love Pink Panther movies, especially Return of the Pink Panther. There's one scene I will watch over and over again because I just love it. Let's see, Pink Panther, and I'm forgetting something. Get Smart.
Yes, I was going to guess that.
Get Smart. And Bugs Bunny. So kind of like the sensibility of those, just where kind of anything can happen. And I just finished the draft for the first one, and I just am having the best time with it. Because it's just silly and campy. And yet I still have, like, I can't help myself. There's like, there's a message, there's an undertone of like a positive message in it because I can't help myself. I always have to say something, but yeah, I love it. So yeah, but that was a lot. I mean, I was amazing. I only had one book. Like I had Not Enough. That's all. I didn't know at that time what a series was. So I didn't even think to pitch a series. I just pitched this one book, and then I got a 2-book deal, and I was like, oh no, I only have one book. So I called a friend of mine, also an author, and I was like, hey, Mark, I have no idea what I'm doing. And he goes, no one does. And I was like, okay, all right.
None of us do.
There we go. And and I have more stories to tell. And I think as I've gotten to know her and her friends as characters, this, you know, the first one was the most challenging because I was figuring out the world. Who are they? What, you know, and it's been really fun. Like I've learned so much from them. And I've learned so much about friendship, just like in writing and like, you know, showing up for people. It's really interesting what I've learned from the characters themselves.
Yeah, well, you know, because writing, you have to figure out the motivations of your protagonist, but then you also have to figure out the motivations of the antagonist or the secondary characters. And as I've said before, like the antagonist does not think that they're the antagonist of their story. They're the protagonist of their story.
It's true. I love that. That's excellent. I love that.
And you know what? Look, I'm going to be blunt with you. Scholastic wouldn't have been picking up books 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and beyond if readers didn't just love these books and weren't devouring these books. So I am so grateful that you powered through all of that unknown and all of those rejections to give the world this book series, and that you've got more in the works. And it must have also been very difficult for you, somebody who always wanted to be making cartoons for the newspaper, and then comic strips in the newspaper is a dwindling proposition for cartoonists and for newspapers. So you must have just felt like you jumped onto a ship with firm standing, for lack of a better expression. I don't know, like, I don't want to say comic strips are a sinking ship, because they're not. They still exist, but it's a lot more difficult to break in and have that be your job, right?
Yeah, and I felt like I got there like 20 years too late, you know, as it was I got the syndicated comic started in 2013. And I felt like, you know, that the golden age of comics. I mean, when growing up, they were on like the Tonight Show. You know, they were superstars, the syndicated cartoonists. So it has changed. And I think one of the biggest heartbreaks for me now is that so many people use my comics for free to build their own base without any credit, but they're sticking them through AI machines. And the irony is I'm getting them fed back to me on Instagram, recommended for you, my own comic getting destroyed. So I feel like they've become memes now.
Yes,
so people think
yeah.
they're just free to the public. It's just a meme. And it's not. I mean, memes are great and memes are funny and there's a lot of really funny stuff out there. But I actually just read an article about that recently, that comics are memes and there's so much more that goes into them. So I felt like it was a hard decision. It was a heartbreak because it was such a life goal. It took me 3 years to make the decision to move away from that. But I have so many more stories to tell. And I know for myself personally that my own mental health would have suffered if I had the Nat series, a daily comic, and another series. I know people who can do it, but my personal...
You have to know your limits and you have to know, and if you are not at your best, then your work's not going to be at your best.
Well, that's it. I felt like it was getting diluted, across too many things.
I will say this loud and clear for any creator out there who is just feeling the weight of the world. Self-care is so important because if there's no you, there's no book. Right?
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad that while it was a difficult decision, that you realized you needed to have a little bit more space in your life to be at your fullest. And it's tricky because when people, comic strips and graphic novels, they have a lot in common. It's the same medium in a different format. But one thing, when I've seen these Nat books come out in rapid succession, I was like, oh, yeah, Maria used all of her training as coming up with a daily comic strip for all those years. Like that work ethic has definitely fed into what she's doing as a graphic novelist.
It did. And the other thing, funny enough, Nat a Chance is about Nat doing a triathlon. And I wrote about that because my biggest training for graphic novels was doing an Ironman triathlon. And I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a 2.4 miles swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a full marathon all at the same time, at the same day.
I'm tired just thinking about it.
I've always loved exercise, and I've always loved the metaphor of exercise and what I've learned about myself from it. So I loved riding a bike when I was little. So I have Nat do a triathlon and Nat a Chance. And it's also sort of her moving out of her own way and the idea that things that are seemingly impossible are possible. So for me, Ironman was like, there's no way I can do that. So when I did it, that opened the door for other things to be possible. And so when the graphic novel came up, I was like, okay, it's a giant goal. I break it down into small pieces. I have a timeline. So like the most thing I got out of Iron Man was the mental training, discipline, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're tired, whatever, you just keep going. It's one step after the other, one page after the other. So that for me was the best possible training I could have ever had for writing graphic novels.
Well, and that's not always something cartoonists would think about, that we could be athletic and do hard things. So I'm so glad. Maybe I'll start jogging inspired by that. I
have to say, a lot of my creativity, I'm now a trail runner. I've got this amazing running group called Sunday Runs. We run there's a run every single day of the week except for Mondays. And every weekend, there's like a huge crowd of people out there. If I can get up at 4:30 in the morning, I get there during the week. And it fuels my creativity. I mean, it's a challenge because I like to roll out of bed and write. So some days I want to 4:30, I want to write. I'm not always up at 4:30. On the days I have a lot of insomnia and I'll just go work. But I get challenged because I like exercising first thing and writing first thing. So they kind of take different, depending on where I am, they take different spots. But I do a lot of writing, wandering around in the woods. I talk into Siri and just talk into my notes. But walking and running, even running in the woods, is a huge part of my creative process. Even riding my bike.
And there's a direct connection there because when you exercise, when you exercise, your brain releases chemicals that aid in creativity.
Yeah.
So like there's like hard science against that, which I always just think about that when I'm like, should I walk, run, get outside? So I'm gonna join the Maria Scrivan school of getting out there and moving your body to aid in creativity.
I highly recommend it. Yeah. And I have to remind myself of that too when I get stuck. Whenever I get stuck, I'll do just like the phones. I have to remind myself sometimes, like I'm sitting there and I'm like, I got to power through. And then I'm like, I have to go outside. because that's where things are going to move. And just like I have to put the phone down, pick up a sketchbook or take a walk, all of those things. So it's a reminder, but I do try and do something every day. I just love it. And talk about mental health, like that and yoga. Those are my two big obsessions. And I think, like I love standing on my head. I think it like helps shake ideas up.
Really?
So like the ones stuck in my toes get to come down or something. But yeah, so my big things now are trail running and yoga.
Well, maybe with the aid of my family, I'll try standing on my head. Otherwise, I might break a hip or something.
Well, it's practice. And that's what I love about yoga is so much like drawing. It's practice. It's literally called a practice, and every day you show up and you get a little better. You learn something new. That's what I think they're all intertwined. I really do.
I love that.
But don't hurt yourself.
I know. I
Throw
won't.
it at a wall. You can do it against a wall.
I'm going to get out there. I'm going to get out there moving my body because that does help you when you're feeling stuck. And especially in the doldrums of winter here in New England, you especially need that. You are just such a source of positivity and bright light in both your actual existence yourself and in your work. And yes, as we stated in the beginning, people are their work, and getting to know you more like this has solidified that for me, that you are absolutely like your work and you as a person are just one in the same. And I'm so thankful for you. And I'm so grateful that you push past those rejections. I'm so glad that you just didn't allow yourself to forever wallow in self-pity when you couldn't get out and promote your first book. And I value your friendship, and I can't wait to see what you bring us next with both more Nat books and more of the undercover stories.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And you're a huge inspiration to me. And I did wallow. I didn't get stuck there, but I wallowed. But yeah. And actually, I don't even know if I ever told you this. I was at CXC and I went to your talk at CXC. I think it was 2017.
No way.
And I remember, and funny enough, I asked you, I was like, I asked you this question. I said, is it hard to do like more than one book at a time? And you said something about like putting it away completely and then taking out the other one. Here I am talking to you in this moment about doing two books at the same time. I'm telling you, creative synchronicity is a real thing. It's a force of nature and it's awesome. But yeah, you are a huge inspiration.
Oh, wow.
Going to your talk in 2017. And I remember also seeing Mimi Pond at that CXC. And that's when I decided to make Nat a graphic novel. And I thought it was going to be like a Wimpy Kid prose spot illustration kind of situation. But that conference between the two of you. So thank you for inspiring me. You have a direct impact on the entire, all of it. So
I did not know that.
I just totally forgot till we started talking. This is like when I ran into my teacher and it ignited a memory. I've got a lot of stuff buried back here that
we'll have to look through some photos to see if we can spot us together. That is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. So our friendship goes back even further than I thought.
Yes.
I love that. Oh man. Well,
so thank you.
Well, I'll see you in the woods, and of course I'll also see you on Instagram. But I'm gonna text you when I get out there to exercise.
Good.
So that you can hold me to it.
I'll follow you on Strava.
What is that?
Yeah, that's next level. That's Strava's social media for athletes. So every time you run, you get to post that and you put pictures and your route gets shown and everybody's like, gives you kudos. So yeah.
Plus, my family will say the last thing Jarrett needs is another social media app.
I know. I think
I'll
have
post
10.
I'll post it to my Instagram story.
That's
and I'll
fine.
tag you.
I will give you thumbs up instead of kudos or both.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Be well.